Thank you for watching that. One of my favorite authors, Buckminster Fuller, said you can never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you build a new model that makes the old one obsolete. And tonight marks Healthy for Life's foray into the world of disruptive innovation, as Dr. Hyman talked about. For 20 years, Healthy for Life has been here. We've sold science-based supplements. Those of you who are customers who have been here have ever heard Professor Peskin speak. It's about the oils. It's just always about the oils. And I'm a person that, I'm just a regular person like all of you. I was riding down the road and I heard that Bostonian, arrogant, whiny voice. It's all about the oils. And I don't know if any of you, you'd have to be around here a long time. This guy was pushing this book. And I thought, well, and I was near Barnes & Noble, so I just went into the place and I got this book. And if you've ever seen this book, I don't even think this book is in print any longer. But I'm a reader and I'm trained as a researcher. And so I spent hours and hours about going, because this guy said things that just, it blew my mind. It's kind of like Dr. Nish 3 weeks ago. The things he said just blew my mind. And I was a college athlete, eating pizza, pasta, anything the night before I played on Saturday afternoon was the best road to health I could possibly have. And that was our nutritionist and the doctor of the team at the University of Maryland, you know. And so we lived by that. So when I read this book, it just kind of blew my mind. And I followed that recipe. I was 35 pounds overweight, chronic sinus infection. Didn't go to the doctor for that because I really didn't want to have my blood drawn. And you probably know why. Had a father who died of diabetes when I was 17 years old. I didn't want to see, and I was doing everything. I mean, I was still an athlete in my mind, so I was killing myself. And overweight, sinusitis, and our family doctor said, well, here's the prescription for you, a lifetime of antibiotics. And again, I went back and started doing some research on that. That didn't sound like a really good thing. This was 20 years ago, right? Back then, you read all about the cholesterol and everything like that. So at that point in time, I didn't think I had anything to lose. So I started on the regimen that we've had here, the supplements we had here. 6 months later, lost all the weight, shifted my lifestyle. I talked to a lot of our customers that come through. There's supplements out there. They're not magic pills. They're not prescription drugs. They're supplements to a healthy lifestyle. And so I had to change that, but lost all the weight. Went back, my family physician, who's also was a friend, he didn't really know what I had done, but he said, just keep doing it because the sinus infections have gone away, and I haven't had one since, and that was like 20 years ago. So Healthy for Life has been doing that for 20 years. In a lot of ways has been a disruptive innovation because it said things. Brian Peskin was called a quack. His science, which you'll always hear him talk about that, has stood the test of time. Remember when cholesterol was the thing and Brian was going, no, that's not right. That's not what it is. Because your body doesn't regulate cholesterol. Why would you regulate cholesterol? And he would go on, and people were just, and today, cholesterol is a marker, but it's not the issue. And if you do any reading in the world I live in, which is healthcare, inflammation is the rule of the day today. Now maybe that'll change. Maybe we'll find out that inflammation wasn't the issue. Maybe we'll find out that stress that creates inflammation or the sugar, as Dr. Nish talked about 3 weeks ago. So we have done 3 things. When Brian asked me to come on board, oh gosh, about 6 months ago and said, okay, this is what I'd like to do, I'd like to see. So we inaugurated a speaker series. And the purpose of that speaker series is to expose our clients, our customers, as well as the public to the wonderful disruptive innovators like Dr. Seeman. And I'll let Sandy tell you her story. I won't take the time to do that. But to expose as many people as we possibly can for those disruptive innovators. And we believe that health is a disruptive innovator. We believe the answer to our healthcare crisis, the outcomes that we have, and the cost of those outcomes, we believe the answer, the solution to those is health. And so we'll introduce you, including all forms of health, environmental, health, nutrition, everything like that. We just interviewed a professor from the University of Iowa Dr. Lou Licht, and he's agreed to come probably sometime. He has created a water purifier made out of poplar trees. And so we're going to have poplar trees that are going to be able to go into systems in cities. And I got a chance to go with him and see one of those do that. Poplar trees, where the bad water comes in, it goes through this incredible roots with carbon. I really didn't understand the science, but I understood when the stuff going in and he went over to the spigot, the thing coming out, it was clear. Now the mayor of Mechanicsville wouldn't drink it, but Dr. Lick did. And it just blows your mind that somebody in Iowa is creating that type of purification. Disruptive innovators. And I can't go into the economics of that, but I can't tell you how much money that saves a little town like Mechanicsville, where the median income is $30,000 a year, I think. So there's another thing. The second thing we're doing is we put together a concentrated educational program. The Healthy for Life University has been vetted. Dr. Buchkina, who will be here next month, talking about gut health, talking about irritable bowel, talking about leaky gut. She vetted our curriculum through the University of Iowa, one of the medical clinics there. So it's a good. I was there at the clinic when the curriculum was going thrown around in pages, and Brian and a couple other people took it and put it in the place that it is. It's good stuff, and we're going to concentrate on bringing people in and just talking through those kinds of things, how to get people healthy, how to remove the barriers from people's minds that keep them from being healthy. And then the last thing we're doing, we're just offering health coaching, just getting together. And what is health coaching? Health coaching is just caring about folks. And it's about guiding people. You know, I know how to get healthy because I've done it. I was sick and I got healthy. And I had a real reason to get healthy. I didn't want to be my father. I didn't want to die at 53 years of age and leave my kids alone like I was left alone. So health coaching for me is a passion. People can do it. All of you can get health. I don't know where all of you sit here tonight, what condition you are in health, but you can get healthy. I know you can. As Dr. Hyman put, we've been led to believe that that's not the case. You just get sick. It just comes out of nowhere. It used to be genetic determinism, right? You remember those days. That's been debunked by so many years. It's not even funny anymore. Less than 2% of our diseases. Mayo Clinic now runs a 5-minute video. The head of cardiology there, 93, I think, if you look at it, 93% of our diseases are all lifestyle. They're all what we put in our body, what we don't put in our body, our lack of movement, and our stress that we live under, and our inability to know how to handle that stress. Whether that stress is an external thing that comes to us, or whether lots of our stress becomes, right, internal. I can't, I don't deserve, I'm not good enough. Granddad told me I'd always be fat. Grandma said this. This is just always running our family. When I was at the clinic, Preventative Health Sciences, if I heard that one, we could take it back to Scotland and great-great-great-grandpa Seamus. He was fat. He was sick. Okay, so then, and that's a very, very powerful thing. Hi, welcome. And so we put together a health coaching program, and all of these we can talk if you guys are interested about it later. We can sign you up. The first class is next Thursday night. We just literally got this all squared away last week. Really, yesterday we got this put together. So if anyone wants to talk about that, I'd be more than happy and love to talk to you about that. And I want to give props to the owner of Healthy for Life. What you see around here is Brian's work. He's an engineer. I can't tell you what he's done. It's amazing. It's amazing. And it takes a lot of work, and this was full of dust and paint and everything like that. And I don't know what my emotion's about, but so yeah. Yeah. So thanks, Brian, for what he did. And Brian's been doing this for 20 years. He's the owner. He's been here from the beginning. It used to be over on University, and so it couldn't have been done without Brian and Brian, the two Brians. Brian Peskin, Healthy for Life, was originally built upon the science of Brian Peskin. He'll be here in May, and he's still talking oils. So we're talking about oils. So anyway, please tell your family and friends what's going on out here at Healthy for Life. We're sure excited about it. Our speaker tonight, I met Sandy, I don't know, 10 years ago, and I think I interviewed her at a restaurant that no longer exists. I think myself and Kate Brown, isn't that? I'm not that old, San. I was a program director at the time, and I think we were talking to her about kind of vetting her for working with each other. We were going to work together. I think that's what it was. And then somebody had mentioned, well, Sandy's a doctor, but she's not licensed in the state of Iowa. So when somebody says that about a doctor, you know what I mean? And this was 10 years ago, and I wasn't real up on the naturopathic, you know, medical doctor thing, what we do in Iowa. I've since learned that we're one of 3 states that don't allow naturopathic doctors, you know, and 47 other states do. And I thought, wow, she's not licensed. So, you know, what did that mean? And so I went online to the medical school. If you ever want to see a place that I wish I was 20, I would go there. I'd become a doctor, to the medical school that she went to. It's in this beautiful wooded area in Seattle. It's called Bastyr University. It is the premier medical school for both naturopathic medicine and the ancient arts of what our grandparents would have said, eat your fruits and vegetables, and a couple other herbs and things like that in the woods. And so that's Sandy. And I asked a couple of my doctor friends back then, I said, well, naturopathic doctors, what do you guys know about them? It's real easy, Tim. They work on health, Tim. And I'm going to give these guys away because I'm close enough. They're cardiologists at the University of Iowa. And we do disease, Tim. It's pretty simple. And that's good for people that need heart surgery. And Sandy's got a story to tell you tonight, a little bit about that. But that was it. That's all I needed to know about Sandy. Sandy does health, and we leave the rest alone. And so, as Dr. Hyman said, doctors of the future are dedicated to root cause medicine. We want to go after what causes us to be sick, and most of it's related to our lifestyle, the way we live. And by the way, I got really good news. And Dr. Hyman didn't say this strong enough. It's not your fault. Think about that. It's not your fault. The food industry, there's a thing called bliss point, and fat, sugar, and what's the last one? Fat, sugar, and salt all come together, and they just do blissful things to my head while they're doing horrible things to my body, right? So it's not your fault. It is your responsibility, though, because at least right now, I don't see the food industry moving that way. And the hospitals and the doctors, God bless them, they're just keeping up with diseases. If you I live in that world, so I do a lot of research. I have friends that are in that world, and it's a tough place to live, and we support them. We want to support them. They've got a tough job. So that's, so the doctor of the future will be a teacher of health. And I refer our customers here who come and say, hey, do you know any good doctors? And I refer them to Sandy. There's other good doctors here, but I refer them to Sandy because I know Sandy knows how to get people healthy. So without further ado, listening to me, Dr. Sandy Seeman. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you.
What an introduction. There was even like a Goodwill Hunting moment in there. Like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. I felt the emotion well up. Well, I'm happy to be the one to sort of break ground here. You know, this place was built with blood, sweat, and now tears have come into it. So that was why the emotion came in, because it hadn't been spilled yet. So happy to be here. I am a naturopathic doctor, and I do answer this question quite a bit, like, what is a naturopathic doctor? And everybody wants to talk about modalities. Everybody wants to talk about what I use to, help people to get healthy. But I always want to talk about philosophy first, because first, we were drilled as philosophers before we ever started working on medicine. And so for me, and I remind people of this on a daily basis, sometimes on an appointment-by-appointment basis, that our bodies are designed to heal themselves. We don't have to put anything on our cuts. We don't have to do anything for our body to be able to heal itself. So every symptom, everything that is happening within our body is an attempt of the body to heal itself. And I always think of my job as to remove obstacles to the body being able to heal itself, or assist the body healing itself. If I'm working against the body, I'm working as the wrong type of doctor. I'm not practicing the type of medicine that I want to practice. And then, you know, every doctor takes the oath of first do no harm, but I always think of, you know, me as keeping that oath, you know, from that standpoint. We know that, you know, there's a 6-figure number of people who die every year from appropriately prescribed medications. We're not talking about mistakes. We're talking about you should get this medicine. This is the medicine that you need to get, and it still kills people. You know, so for me, those are no options for me because of that rate, you know, of that happening. And so, you know, minimizing side effects. You know, sometimes people are frustrated, but they leave my office with less is more, you know, as far as, you know, the supplement suggestions or the diet suggestions or the way to think, you know, as we've talked about, you know, this as well. My job is to be an investigative reporter for health, first and foremost. So I sit with people and I talk with people. I don't give them 90-page surveys before they come to my office, which is, you know, a lot of what I see in this movement and trend towards functional medicine. I don't do that. I don't want you to sit and fill out paperwork for hours. You know, you've done that enough. Paperwork, you know, we're all just finishing up with taxes. We do enough paperwork every day. So I just sit with people, listen to people, hear their story, and get to the bottom of what it is that I need to work with people. I don't do reductionist medicine. To me, your itchy big toe is just as important, you know, as what's going on with the rest of your body. It's all connected, you know, and, you know, body, mind, spirit. You know, some of my clients leave my office saying, wow, you know, I feel like I've been to a counselor. And I say, well, we didn't separate out, you know, your stress level. We didn't separate out any of those things from you. I think of my job as a doctor, as teacher, and I tell people, because I do get this call at least twice a week, you know, are you taking new patients? And I jokingly tell people, if I'm not working myself out of a job and taking new patients all the time, I'm not doing my job. I should teach you how to be your own best doctor, and I call it graduating, you know. You should get to the point to where we see each other just when we need to, just when, you know, just as we need to, sometimes seasonally, sometimes less than that. Sometimes I say, we'll be happy to run into you in the bowling alley, you know, is the idea. And then prevention. My story as a doctor, and I shared this with Tim, and I don't know, it struck me that you didn't know this about me, but I am the child after. My parents lost a baby who was 7 months old, and it took a lot of courage, you know, it probably took a lot of tears and a lot of fear for my parents to have the courage to have another child. After what they went through, just knowing an inkling of it, you know. But every cell, every piece of DNA, everything within me was built with the prayer, because my parents are very spiritual-based people. Let her be healthy. Please let her be healthy. So I live that prayer every single day. That is my mission. That is who I am, down to the core, you know. And I think when I told my mom that, she's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess. Like, it didn't even really connect for her the way that it connected for me, you know, that why I was the kid that was asking the questions that I was asking, and why I was doing the things that I was doing, and why I wasn't happy with rice-a-roni, and why I wasn't happy, you know, with all of these things that I learned. I knew I wanted to be a doctor from the time that I was 8 years old. And I know that because my dad was in the hospital with leukemia at that time, and the doctors were the heroes who were going to save my dad, who knew what to do, who knew how to heal him, who knew the medicine to give based on what they saw in the white blood cell count. So I was asking all of these questions, and I was learning all of these things, and they were the ones who were going to fix it. And when they didn't fix it, when my dad didn't survive, I asked more questions. I just kept asking questions. And for me, when I decided to go to college and be the doctor that I knew I'd always wanted to be, I sought out at the University of Iowa the Department of Preventative Medicine, because to me, that's the kind of medicine I wanted to do. I didn't want other kids to go through what Tim went through and what I went through. If we can prevent diabetes, if we can prevent cancer, if we can prevent all of these things, then no one has to grow up without a dad. That for me was my, you know, mission. Again, Let them be healthy. Let her be healthy. Let her, help other people find health. And so there is no Department of Preventative Medicine. It was a blurb, but there is no such thing. And so I was grateful to learn about Bastyr University when I was there. And I was grateful to have that experience, to learn about a type of medicine that is about healing people, that is, part philosophy, part medicine. There are 3 states where naturopathic medicine is illegal to practice, but there are 20 states where it is legal. So there's a gray area in there as well. Based on me being unlicensed in Iowa, I can practice based on what they determine as the practice of medicine. The practice of medicine is identifying and naming disease, also called diagnosis. To me, I tell people this all the time. I don't care if it's called purple spotted liver disease. I don't care what it's called. To me, it doesn't matter what it's called. That's the beginning of the question of what is the cause? What is the cause of that? What is the cause of that? What is the cause of that? That's where my questioning starts. So, I don't diagnose people, and that's just, to me, a semantics, because the same disease can have multiple causes, and multiple diseases can have the same cause, just as we've talked about with diet. There's lots of different answers with that. And then I don't treat disease because I treat the cause. I treat people. I help people gain health. I don't take away disease. That's not my goal. My goal is to help you gain, not to help you to lose. So I don't do physical exams. I don't do pap smears. I don't listen to this or take people's blood pressure in my office. I do other things. You were talking about the next step of medicine being about stress, and that to me is really the biggest step, in medicine. I don't have an adversarial relationship with, cardiologists or any other doctor. I have a son who was born a few weeks after I passed my board exams to become a doctor, and he was born with a congenital heart condition. So were it not for surgery, were it not for the practice, of what we call conventional, medicine, we're trying to be, when we're trying to differentiate, they call me alternative, so I call them conventional. Without them, my son wouldn't be, the rambunctious teenager fighting me on math that he is. So I have all types of gratitude for all types of medicine. And when people want to come in my office and bash doctors, we have a whole conversation about how that's not the problem. The system is the problem, and the system is not people. The system was set in place based on greed, based on money, based on numbers, and all of these things. And that's not the problem. The problem is not people. The problem is the system. The system is broken. So right now, until licensing is passed, which, could take a hop, skip, and a jump, I will not practice medicine, but I will help people gain health in this state. I do a lot of reinterpretation of labs because I'm looking for health. I'm not looking for disease when I read your labs. I'm looking for nutrition information, which is all hidden between the lines there. It's all of that information is there. People can self-refer. That's the other great thing that's come out of all, everyone wanting to be empowered right now. There are labs that you can self-refer to, and you can get any test. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't have this test for your thyroid, or you can't have this test for food sensitivities, or you can't have this test. Stop asking them. Get it yourself. It's out there. My job is to identify the cause, and I do a lot of what I call therapeutic trial with people. All of your symptoms sound like you're deficient in B12. We can order a lab that would spend, $150 for you to find out that you're deficient in B12, or we can add in B12. See how you do. See if you feel like somebody just plugged in the lamp that was not plugged in, which is how you feel when you don't have it. And we'll see what happens. Spend $12. Don't spend $150, to find out an answer we might already know based on what we're seeing. So it sounds like you already had the lecture if you were here, or you've probably already had it a million times about what's wrong. We don't eat enough vegetables. I have people come into my office, and when I say, tell me about your diet, they look down at the floor is the first thing that they do. Or they look, look up and to the left is when you're inventing information. So we already know all of this stuff. We know we eat too many processed foods. You know, we know we eat out too much. We know where we need to grow. We know what our growing edges, you know, are already. And hearing more of it is sometimes gets us into a shame-blame cycle that doesn't help us. You know, it doesn't move us forward. So I set out to create the what to do lecture is really what I wanted to do. And I wanted to start out with a big word about addiction, not because I want to create a 12-step program for you all, but because, again, it's not your fault. Addiction was thrust onto us by a food industry, and also it was fed into several different problems that perpetuate the cycle. No matter how much your willpower wants you to eat this ugly vegetable that's here, we have to develop a love for it. We have to build a microbiome or a symbiotic relationship with a whole trillions of cells that help us, not move us backwards, you know, along that. I want to talk about the difference between hunger and satiety, and I didn't find the answer I expected to find when I looked at what promoted satiety. So I want to share that with you, and it's really about developing a diverse palate. It's about cooking food with lots and lots of flavor, and it doesn't have to be about spice. I will tell you, I am a one-star person, always have been, always will be. Iowa girl from start to finish. It's not about spicy food. To me, spicy food ruins your palate. You know, it will ruin a meal for me and make me stop, you know, eating. So it's about flavor. It's not about spicy food. It's about spices and herbs, but it's not about spicy food. So if that's something that you have in your mind, like I had for a long time, I had a teacher who was brilliant enough and, you know, kind enough to believe in me and to take me to my first Indian restaurant when I was in high school. Before I knew anything about, you know, Indian food or anything about what it tasted like, and I hated every bite of it. It was spicy. It was strange. It didn't look great. There was just nothing about it. But it's, you know, the average is that it takes 12 times of trying something new before you can even develop an appreciation or an understanding, or before, to me, it's before your tongue can explain to your brain what you're doing, what's happening here. So that's one thing too, is, you know, about moving into it a little bit at a time. You know, she sort of jumped me in with both feet, you know, into Indian food by try everything, you know, go to the buffet and take a little bit of everything. And that was a good introduction, but I didn't eat Indian food again for a decade after that. So not the experience I want to promote to you all, but certainly an introduction for me in flavor, you know, for that as well. And then I want to talk about how to plan for success, how to plan, you know, and think ahead that can be helpful for you as well. So why do we eat sugar? Jacob Teitelbaum wrote this book. It's not a new book, you know, so you might even find it, you know, used somewhere if it's a book that you want to search out. But he talks about he identifies 4 different types of sugar addicts is what he calls them. And, you know, for me, I do think we're all sugar addicts, but I don't have a big reaction from a lot of my clients when I tell them they need to eat less sugar. A lot of us already know that, but I think we can set up an imbalanced relationship with other foods as well, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit as we go on. But I've had more people, you know, stomp out of my office angry because I asked them to eat less meat. I've had people, you know, angry and stomp out of my office for telling them to eat, you know, not eat dairy. You know, my own family had an intervention for me when I told them I was going to become a vegetarian, which didn't stick, but at least, you know, were just like, you know, based on the way that we were taught, what we grew up learning about food, they thought I was going to starve. They thought, you know, I was going to waste away out there in Seattle when I was eating a vegetarian diet. And so, you know, making these kind of suggestions to people, not as a forever, but as a diet, as a reset, you know, your relationship with this food. I talk about elimination, you know, with foods like that. And like I said, I see us having that tug and pull, which to me is what addiction is about. I love it and I hate it. That's, you know, really, I love it and it hurts me, you know, that relationship that I see. And I see a lot of that with sugar. And the underlying causes are things like Energy depletion, we use it to keep us going. We use it at 3 o'clock when, you know, the train wheels are slowing down and we're not going to power through the rest of the day if we don't do something. So we use it for that. We use it for regulation of stress, that feeling of being out of control. You know, all of those feelings. You know, I start talking about cardiologists. I start talking about, you know, what I think of as the future of stress response is, I just, like, this is the thing I'm geeking out on right now, is heart rate variability and the understanding of how our heart talks to our brain talks to our heart talks to our heart because it has its own brain inside of it, and how our lungs talk to our heart. And all of that determines our heart rate from moment to moment, to beat to beat to beat. So big difference, and it's all to do with these micro shifts based on whether we're safe or whether we're not safe. And we can have a smell, we can have a trigger. I could see this, I could look at that and not feel safe. And so I see that response in people, and that's how, you know, I hook people up to this little thing that you clip on your earlobe that measures your heart rate, and it shifts. And we talk about stressful things, and we do stress breathing, you know, how to respond, you know, to stress and things, and you get to see the shift in your heart rate variability right there in my office. So that's what I've been using to help people to learn self-regulation, because right now we use things outside of ourselves to deal with what's out of our control. We use food, we use, you know, we yell at our kids, you know, like I do. We do all of these things because of what we feel is out of our control. But the more in tune we get to how we can regulate our response to anything, it's not what happens to us, it's how we choose to respond to it, and how we feel out of control if we don't feel like we can be in control of how we respond to it. So we talk a lot about stress in my office and how to shift your response to stress. Our microbiome, our gut bacteria can set us up to have an imbalanced relationship with sugar, because there's a direct link from here to here that tells us what to eat, because they want to be fed. You know, that is really a lot of what it is that goes on. So again, that goodwill hunting, it's not your fault, you know, moment. Hormone imbalance, and that we are set up based on hormones, you know, to have a shift, whether it's a monthly shift or whether it's an all the time. I always say, you know, the difference between hormones is that we go from alternating current, you know, women will know what I mean, to direct current, where we're always shifting, you know, back and forth with hormone balance. So I wanted to create a lecture about not what to take away. I wanted to create a lecture about what to add in. Adding in minerals, you know, that's one thing that I know is a big part of this place, you know, is how mineral depleted we all are, and how when we're mineral depleted, we are set up to crave more and more sugar. If we're B vitamin depleted, if we're herbal depleted, if we're not detoxifying our body the way that we know how to do, that we will be depleted of energy, and that we will use sugar oftentimes to put us back into balance with that. So when we talk about our microbiome, cell to cell, we are outnumbered, and that floors me every time I think about that I am more bacteria, virus, yeast, you know, all of that than I am me. Again, you know, when I talk about being made up, every cell being made up of this geared towards health, I hope that, you know, my buddies down here are the same, you know, from that standpoint. But I also know there are times they don't set me up for health too. Have another bite of chocolate, have another bite of this, you know. Don't you want some ice cream? So I know from that standpoint that there is a constant set of competition. There's a constant set of balance. I, you know, talk about it in my office as being like a scale. And we don't eat as close to the earth as we would like to. This kale did not come from my garden the way that I would love for it to. I have kale growing right now that will go in, you know, when everything thaws, but it's not even baby kale. It's not even infant kale. It's like fetus kale. It's how tiny my kale is right now. So we don't live, you know, we are constantly introducing bacteria from all over the country, you know, at best, and all over the world at worst. You know, if we're getting apples from Chile, or if we're getting blueberries or zucchini right now, you know, it's coming from Mexico or it's coming from somewhere else. when we travel to these places, what happens when we drink the water? We get sick, right? We get traveler's diarrhea. Well, what do you think they're using to water this? Exactly the same water. So we are in effect drinking the water of all over the country and possibly all over the world every time we eat right now, because we are a mishmash, you know, and for good reason. I'm so grateful that I can have kale, you know, here, because I don't want to just be eating root vegetables, you know, all the time, all winter. So I'm grateful for that, but I also keep in mind that my microbiome is constantly getting challenged with bacteria from all over, and that's at best that they're good bacteria. You know, we've seen all the time, you know, within the last 6 months or a year, where it hasn't always been good bacteria that's getting introduced as well. So if we're have to be constantly putting in as much as we can, a plug for agriculture, you know, local company that does good cultured, you know, real pickles, real sauerkraut, you know, not that stuff that you'll see that can live on a shelf. This has to be in a fridge. And I brought this home, you know, because we do most of our shopping, we try to do most of our shopping one day a week. Brought this home, and of course, by the time it is here, it's already halfway gone, because that's the way that it happens at my house. Ooh, you got you got sauerkraut. So if we're not continuously putting in the good, we're not maintaining the balance based on what we're eating and what we're introducing. And so what we know when we eat out, we have even less control, you know, over where our food is coming from and what introduction, you know, it is that's happening there as well. So we know that we have these chemical signals from the gut brain to the brain to the heart brain and back and forth, that it's all one continuous regulation. In order to show a client of mine today, I hooked him up to that little earlobe thing, and he was saying, you know, the doctors wanted to put me on anxiety medicine because I kept talking about my digestive system, what's going on with my digestion, and I don't want to take anxiety medicine, you know, and I don't think that that's what it has to do with it. So we did a short amount of breathing, hooked him up to that, and lo and behold, I started hearing gurgling. I started hearing digestive sounds, and I said, there it is, right there. As soon as we calmed this down, this started to be active, because we have to be relaxed for our gut to turn on. Otherwise, it's off. It's the opposite. When we're turned on, this is turned off. We have to be powered down for that to happen. So it was a nice introduction just to see the impact between that. And I understand that he didn't want to take the medicine, but we had to talk about how to do it without, how to come to that space without. So we talked about, you know, whether it was a prayer, whether it was just deep breathing like he did in my office, something before you eat, you know, before you put food in here and ask this to do its job, you have to be relaxed, you know. Can't be driving down the road eating, which is what he does, because he drives for a living. So we're set up to have, you know, based on our history, based on what we've introduced, you know, and based on just size alone. Yeast compared to a virus or compared to bacteria is like huge difference, you know, so even a little bit of yeast can make a big difference in our digestive system, and sends that signal from this brain to this brain that says, you know, don't you want some of that fast food, or don't you want some of that ice cream, or don't you want some of that fruit? You know, I mean, it gets smarter as we get smarter. It gets smarter, you know, don't you want to put a little bit more honey in your tea? All of those things in order to keep getting fed as well. So constantly having that back and forth where our immune system is working all the time is a drain on our energy. I talk about every day, you know, if we start out the day with $100, you know, is what we have to spend for the day, we spend 70 of those $100 digesting our food, absorbing our food, and making, you know, the proteins that, you know, communicate in our body, making, you know, the enzymes that digest the next meal, making those things with it. So we spend a lot of energy on digestion. And if our microbiome isn't helping us, if it isn't our friend, then it's working against us. And we're already working, you know, against that $30, you know, for the day to do that. So it's really difficult without balancing your microbiome which doesn't seem like it's connected, or balancing your stress, again, doesn't seem like it's connected, to balance your sugar and your sugar cravings as well. So setting yourself up for success with that. So we talked about sauerkraut as well, one of the ways to build a healthy microbiome, as well as some things to watch out for, with that as well. We know that there's a lot of medicines. We know that there's a lot of talk about things like GMOs, and I don't want to open a can of worms here, but that's how we know that GMOs affect us is the research, there's this division with this kind of research, just like there is with lots of different research. To me, when I read research that says that is damaging to our microbiome, it may or may not be damaging to the human body. That, is arguable. But it being damaging to the microbiome, to me, is just as damaging to the body as well. So we can't really separate out the two. Again, we can't be reductionist. We can't say, well, it harms your microbiome, but it doesn't harm you. Well, of course it does, because we're one and the same. We're connected. We're both being carried around the same skin suit. Of course we're together in this. So, adding in fermented foods for metabolism, and that is wide and varied, and then adding in prebiotics, whether it's something that you purchase separately or whether it's just adding into your diet a diverse array of fibers. To me, it's just as important to where you start. If this is your starter, to get you started, to add in one specific acacia fiber, again, not something that's local to us, but something that we know is really, really good at feeding good bacteria. I talk about our gut bacteria like a pet. We have to feed our pets on a day-to-day basis, and if we're not working with it, if we're not there just yet with adding in enough diversity of fibers in our diet, because they don't all like the same food, but a heck of a lot of them like this. So that's a good place for me to start. It's called acacia fiber, is the type of fiber that it is. It's called prebiotic fiber. That's been a big trend in the last few years, is probiotics and prebiotics, and even symbiotics is the fancy word for the two of them together, when you put them both together in the same capsule. What's that? It doesn't change the taste or texture, really. It makes water cloudy, but it doesn't really change the taste or texture, so it could really go in anything. Yeah. And fiber is not going to be hurt by heat, so it could go in a soup. It could go in, so that's one thing that's nice. Again, if you're not there just yet, you start by adding it in as a supplement as you're working it into your diet. So prebiotics, to me, are just as important as the probiotics. You got to feed the good guys, otherwise the other guys are going to get fed because they're going to tell you they want to get fed. So, and then, again, last resort for me is to utilize a supplement to kill what shouldn't be there, because it typically creates a lot more disruption to the system, what we call a die-off reaction, if you're familiar with that idea. For me, if we can just add in, we don't have to worry about what to take away from that standpoint. But I like to use natural options that don't harm the good bacteria, where they're seek and destroy, so to speak, the ones that shouldn't be there, so that we can seamlessly add in while we take away, and we don't have to do the full wipe out, start over kind of idea like we do with others. So what I thought I was going to find when I was looking at the difference between hunger and satiety, what I thought I was going to find is that things like fats and proteins, were really important for helping us to have that full feeling. To me, that off switch that your stomach sends to your brain that says stop eating. The classic example is like there's that John Candy movie, where they set in front of him a steak that would barely fit, on this, this huge platter. And in the beginning, he's just taking nice bites. He's just going along and plugging along. And then towards the end, his hand is shaking and he's, reduced to just childlike, I don't want to eat anymore, but his, I think his Dan Aykroyd is feeding him to him and making him eat it, So I thought that's what I was going to find, is that it was about fat and protein. That's really, what tells our body to stop eating and what makes us not eat more. But it's not. It's actually both stretch receptors within our stomach, which comes from more fiber and more volume from that standpoint, but it has to be quick. It has to be something that quickly does that. Otherwise, it's going to empty out just as fast. We all know that crackers, you can keep eating crackers forever, no matter how fiber rich they are, no matter if they're those fancy paleo crackers, you can still eat them forever. You can eat them till the cows come home, you know, and you're never going to get full because you know, it's getting emptied out of there just as fast as you're filling it in, from that standpoint. So flavors are actually, the more flavors you put in your food, and again, I'm not talking about just spice, I'm talking about flavors, bombards that part of the brain, the appetite center of the brain, that's like, whoa, I've had enough. You know, again, I always talk about sort of confusing, and that's probably exactly what happened to me the first time I went to that Indian restaurant. I just had to stop eating because it was just too much. My brain couldn't take it. You know, tandoori this, you know, masala this, no more. So we know that we want to take the most activity that we can out of nutrient density. We want to get the most per bite. We want to get the most nutrition that we can per bite. We also want to have healthy digestion and healthy absorption so that we get the most out of our food. You know, I'm not the first person to say that we live in a culture where we're overfed but undernourished. You know, is exactly what I find. So we need to be really choosy about the foods that we find. Otherwise, we don't stop eating because we're still hungry at the end of that giant steak. You know, if it's not fed the right things, if that animal wasn't fed the right things for it to become a nutrient-dense piece, we can't eat that whole steak and still be hungry from that standpoint. And we talked about this a little bit before, but I see people really fall into that shame-blame cycle. And I see that happen a lot in doctors' offices too, where people come to me, you know, again, you know, having, you know, seen their doctor every year, and the scale keeps going up, you know, a few pounds every year, every time they go in for that annual exam, and they're told, eat right and exercise, right? How many times have we been told that, you know, that saying, but we're not taught really how to do that, and we're not taught. It could have more to do with your digestive system. It could have more to do with you're not supplementing your diet based on the depletion of our soils, you know, and no one sees this more than we do. My family has this rite of passage that we do every year. There's this 22-mile bike ride from Perry to Rippey that's called the Burr Ride in February. And as we were doing it this year, we were all commenting at how, you know, we were saying, like, why is the snow all black? Why is this, you know, there's no reason that the snow should be black. And what we realized is that the fields from across the way, all the topsoil had blown off, and that's what was in the ditch on the snow that we were passing. That's the snert that we were riding past, you know, on that bragging rights bike ride that we do in the beginning of February every year this year. And we noted just, you know, again, how it's worse year to year, how that snow is now the same color as those chairs. So how sad it is that all of this good nutrient-rich soil, you know, has been blown away and ends up, you know, where it's going to grow, who knows what, you know, weeds. We don't call them weeds, we call them probably things on our plate, right? But that's what grows there, and probably will be healthier for it, you know, all of that, those dandelions that grow down there. So when we talk about appreciating flavors, and we talk about boosting flavors, and we talk about how to take this thing, this monstrosity, and make it taste good, we have to recognize the flavor that's already in it, and we have to think about how to balance it. So we know that bitter is the taste of kale, it's the taste of greens, it's the taste of food that's been charred on the grill, it's the taste of, you know, coffee or chocolate if we didn't add a bunch of things in there, you know, like salted caramel and things like that to make it, you know, frappuccino taste good. We know that bitter is a flavor that we are more than familiar with. It's just what we do with that flavor and how we balance that flavor. When somebody taught me that you take your kale and you add in a dressing with a sour flavor, whether you choose a red wine vinegar or a balsamic vinegar or a lemon or an apple cider vinegar or some sort of sour flavor, you start balancing the flavor profile in there. And then you balance it with salty. If you're not a soy person, then you wouldn't use tamari. You would use real salt with minerals in there, or you would use something else along that salt continuum, whatever the, you know, alder smoked or, you know, black salt, pink salt, you know, whatever your favorite real salt is in there to give it that salty flavor. There's even some vinegars that, like plum vinegar, has a really salty flavor in there too. And balancing it out with whatever your favorite pungent is, whether it's a ginger, you know, which I am atrocious at peeling ginger. I'm good at peeling garlic. To me, that I just have one of those little peeler, you know, things that pulls that off, or I smash it, but I'm not great, and I don't love to peel ginger, so I use a ginger juice or a little ginger along that way. So that's one of the things that I use from that standpoint. And I don't think of ginger as hot. It's very flavorful, but it's something, and everybody can find their own balance. Some people like a little bit more salty, and salt is not our enemy. It's been used in combination with sugar, you know, to be out of balance with us. But truthfully, it's less than 20% of people that are sensitive to salt as far as it making them puffy or making them hold on to water weight. Most of us, it's the opposite effect. The more salt we have, the healthier we become because of the real minerals that are in there. So salt is not our enemy. So adding in with pungent flavors, whether it's garlic, whether it's ginger, whether it's an herbal blend, whether it's, you know, cinnamon, whether it's something along those lines. And then there's sugar alternatives, you know, if you need something to wean you away, you know, from that. These are in my, you know, something that I use for me to make things taste sweet, whether it's tea or whether it's, I do a drink every day because I'm too cheap to buy kombucha all the time that's sweet with a little bit of apple cider vinegar, with a little bit of tart cherry juice, you know, I mean, all of those things. So to me, it's as important to drink for health as it is to eat for health, and balancing that out again for satiety, you know, and flavors, because plain old water gets really boring from that standpoint a lot of the time. And then if you're going to utilize sweets that have side benefits. I talk a lot about side benefits, not side effects. So maple syrup is actually an amazing mineral supplement in addition to having a sweet flavor to it. Honey has all of these antimicrobial benefits in addition if it's raw and if it's real, and it has all of these benefits for balancing out your allergenic response if it's local and if it's close, you know, to where you are as well. So at least use a sweetener in the interim, you know, that has side benefits. Maybe you start out with these, you know, where you start is not where you finish. So I don't advocate for all of these, you know, sauces and all of these things that you can find that are already mixed up, because, you know, chances are they've already balanced those with the amount of salt and sugar and all of those things. Whereas if you add it yourself, you can make it just as sour as you want, or make it just as sweet as you want, or up the bitter. You know, over time you start using less of these things, so you start getting used to other flavors. The balance of flavors is something that every other culture, basically besides ours, already works with. You know, there's spice blends like the 5-spice powder, you know, that is already blended with 5 different tastes and 5 different flavors that are already together. That's used a lot in Chinese cooking, for instance. A lot of the masalas and the seasonings that are put together that we'll talk about are already balanced as far as those flavors go. So you don't have to, even if this is too intimidating, you don't even have to invent the wheel. You know, you can buy something that's already put together, you know, and even in bulk, where you can just buy a teaspoon. See if you love it, see if you hate it. Then if you hate it, then don't buy it again. Buy something else.
Are there any books that you recommend on balancing flavors?
Healing with Whole Foods. I think I got this at Half Price Books for $2. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on these things. And there's many editions of this book. You don't have to buy the latest edition because Chinese medicine has been around for 5,000 years. They're not talking about anything new, folks. You know, it doesn't have to be the latest information. They're not, you know, they're not coming up with new evidence about balancing flavors. What's unique about this book compared to other books is it incorporates lots of flavors and it can be really personalized. In Chinese medicine, they think of what's called the constitution. You know, for me, my husband and I have opposite constitutions. I can't get warm enough, you know, so we have the thermostat fight, right? I can't get warm enough and he can't be cool enough. So, you know, so he looks up foods that are hot, you know, for his constitution. And when we make our rice bowl, you know, which is, you know, a little bit of everything that everybody makes their own, he's always putting spicy food on. He's always putting hot sauce on his food. And it's, you know, for what we know from Chinese medicine is that Spicy food actually makes us sweat more, so it's actually cooling. It's the opposite of what we think that it really is. So I don't eat spicy food because it just makes me colder. I don't need to be any colder. I need to be warmer. So I use things that are warming to the core, like ginger. You know, for me, that's what I put on my, you know, my bowl, you know, when we just set out a little bit of everything and everybody gets to put together the way that they want it to look. So that's what works for us, you know, and that personalization of this. You know, in Chinese medicine, they call excessive dampness, what we call yeast imbalance, you know, so you can treat it from a diet perspective, from a Chinese perspective, or you can treat it like Jacob Teitelbaum would, you know, with a whole bunch of things to balance your microbiome. Same issue, just from two different perspectives. So I like this book a lot because it introduces flavors and because it also introduces new foods, new ideas, you know, adzuki beans, you know, things that you would never think, you know, to eat or that you would never know how to cook, but are exciting because you're trying something new. You're getting interested in something new. So there are these tested combinations. There are these 5-spice flavor, you know, which is exciting for me when I discover something like this. Try something new, try something you haven't had before, you know, and try to sprinkle at a time so that you see whether you like it or whether you hate it. For me, I don't buy what's called Italian seasoning. I buy what's called pizza seasoning because it has fennel in there and it has, you know, other spices in there that add that sweet flavor, you know, so that it really balances it out. For me, this has a lot more flavors to it than just the thyme, rosemary, oregano blend. You know, to me, I like and crave more, you know, flavors and more different flavors. That's what I like about something that, you know, trying a new spice, you know, flavoring that maybe you haven't tried. And you can almost smell this through the package. So feel free to come up and try it as well.
Where did you get this?
All of these spice flavorings I just got in bulk. I got them from Campbell's because they're my neighborhood, you know, one, but anywhere that you would be able to find the bulk spices would have it. And so what I have found in my experiences with Indian seasonings is that I don't like spicy food, but I do like flavorful food. So this tandoori masala is something that I will use, but it's not a 4-alarm fire. You know, for me, I don't appreciate, you know, those flavors that are really hot, but I do appreciate spice blends that have lots and lots of flavor. Same thing with garam masala. When I came back around to Indian food, when I circled back around 10 years after I'd tried it and thought I hated it, I found a spice blend, lots of flavor, but really simple, you know, and the soup, the dal that I made was like 5 ingredients. So it was also something, and I was like, I'm gonna try it once. If I hate it, then I'll never, you know, and it's most of it's stuff I've already had before, like tomatoes and lentils, you know, so that was the other great thing that I was able to eventually circle back around and find, lo and behold, I do like Indian food, just not the ones I tried then. And that I had to try it again, you know, to do that as well. So one thing that we do, again, not that we always incorporate that, but that I really like to watch cooking shows like on PBS or, you know, videos that you can find, 5 or 7 minute videos, kind of like what we watched tonight, that helps you, and they talk about developing flavors and building flavors, you know, things for me like bone broth, which Kate will talk you to death about that, but bone broth is one thing that develops flavor. It also develops nutrition because it's full of all of this nutrition that's in there as well. So it takes a broth soup, which, you know, to me, a broth soup before I had bone broth soup was 10 minutes later, okay, well, what's for dinner, you know, and that sticks with you and stays with you and helps you feel full as well. So, you know, one thing that I subconsciously, you know, and talk to my clients a lot about when we talk about what did you have for dinner last night, you know, because I found just asking people that question of what's your typical dinner gets a different up and to the left, you know, invented answer than what was for dinner last night. And so I ask people, how is your plate divided, you know, and so for a lot of people I see it divided into thirds, right, that it's your protein, that it's your veggie at best, you know, as a third. And then it's your other, you know, whether it's a grain or whether it's a potato or whether it's, you know, cauliflower rice or whatever it is, you know, depending on kind of where you're at, where you're going with it as well. So I talk about if you're dividing it into thirds now, think of it dividing into fourths because you're adding in a new idea. You know, you're adding in something new that automatically is what to add in, not what to take away. It's just a different mentality, you know. So I'm always trying to come at it from that positive perspective, because people often walk into my office for a first visit and they think what I'm going to lecture them about. You know, to me, I try to come at it from that positive angle, because it makes it a lot more diverse, you know, conversation, and a often, you know, more fruitful conversation as well. Another thing that we work on, you know, in my office is how to take already what you're making and how to boost it up, you know, how to make it even healthier, you know, as well as what I was saying about drinking for health as well, you know, the incorporating drinks into your day. For me, a lot of times when I think I'm hungry, it's actually that I'm thirsty, you know, so that to me is another thing that I add, is that if I'm hungry before it's actually, you know, that time in my mind that I think I'm going to eat something, maybe I'll have a cup of tea, or maybe I'll have 12 ounces, 16 ounces, you know, however many ounces you can drink, to see, was it just that I was thirsty? You know, am I listening to the wrong part, you know, of my body about what it is I'm adding in as well? So incorporating that is important too. So there's a lot of already put out there diets that have talked about the, you know, the difference of quality versus quantity, and we've made this leap already, hopefully with carbohydrates, you know, and understanding that. And if you need an I'm sorry, or if you need an apology for carbohydrates, then something like the Whole30 diet, which is an apology to sugar. It's 30 days of saying you're sorry that you misused this food. You're going to take a break. You're going to take a time out from that food. And then when you come back, you're ready to create a balanced relationship with that food. To me, the paleo diet is the same idea, often with something like grains. We were so ingrained in the idea that that was supposed to be such a huge portion of our diet that we've had to say, I'm sorry. We've had to eliminate it in order to come back to balance. To me, all of these things are temporary. That's why they're called diets, is that they're a temporary apology for the misuse of this food and to reestablish a healthy relationship with it. I have been saying for 10 years, as long as I've known you, that there was going to be a high-fat diet, because we had to swing the pendulum to find balance with this food. So the keto diet is our apology to fat. For having misused fat, for having said that fat was wrong and bad and the cause of heart disease and the cause of all of these things, even coming out with studies, you know, so it just goes to show we can make a study that shows anything if we want to. So the keto diet is our cultural apology to fat, which is what we're doing as a big experiment right now with all of these people trying it. And the longer people are on it, the more they need to apologize for it. That's my interpretation of what these diets are. And one of my friends says that I need to make a meme of that, but I know very little about memeing. So, and then the vegan diet is the same idea with animal products, you know, calling it the diet for the planet, for instance, you know, is one idea. But for me, if you've misused it, taking a time out from it to reset and reestablish a healthy relationship based on portion size, based on the animals you choose to consume and the way that they lived and the way that they were treated, is worth it, you know. So that's what these are. That's the whole idea, and how our culture comes back to balance with these kinds of foods. The elimination diet is the same idea for me, but with food sensitivities. For me, most of the time I see food sensitivities, including my own, based on my misuse of that food, both for emotional comfort, you know, or for that imbalanced idea that it was a healthy food when it really wasn't. You know, when I became vegetarian, dairy became the healthiest food I could think of, because that's what I was taught. So it became a food sensitivity for me because I overused it, you know, so I had to come back to balance with that food in order to create a balanced relationship with it, and the same thing with gluten. The more we know that our culture, you know, and the way that we treated food in our food industry fed into that with both of those foods as well, and the way that it treats it and the way that it processes those foods also. So that, again, it's not all your fault from that standpoint either. So we know so much more, you know, about food, including information about, you know, how our spiritual health plays into what's on our plate. You know, there's books out there about that as well. If that's a reset that you need, then seek out those resources, because they're out there. I brought my book friends, you know, with me for people, for people to be able to see that there are great resources out there, you know, for this stuff. And I'm, of course, talking way over the time that I was allotted, but so that's me, that's my information. There's cards up here. I'll be here if you have questions, and I know that these fine gentlemen will be here as well.
Anybody questions?
Yes.
So, paleo, keto, Whole30.
Yeah.
So, what is your view? Is it just a balance of all of it that you yourself will figure out how much dairy you're going to have?
There is no right diet. Yeah. Exactly.
So
there is no right diet. It's about listening to this. You know, you have a compass built within you that tells you what you crave and what you don't crave. I spend enough time in my office right now letting people know your body runs on carbohydrates, and that's just fine. That's your best fuel. Don't apologize for that. Don't push yourself to eat more protein. Don't eat yourself to push foods that you don't crave or that you don't digest well or that your system is out of balance because you're pushing yourself to eat more protein because everybody says you need more protein. I spend as much time talking people who trend, you know, towards a vegetarian diet that grains aren't a bad thing, you know, just as much as that as I do telling people to come back to balance.
Is that there's a flip side of that, and that is that if you don't have pleasure, if you don't feel satisfied,
that's right.
Your body will register as if you haven't eaten anything.
Exactly.
And therefore overeat.
That's right.
So the idea of having pleasure, that to me is a very important thing. Being able to feel it and enjoy what you're eating.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? I appreciate that
It's
comment.
the most, because
your
digestion is based and
that's
you
right.
metabolize because of that.
Yeah, this isn't turned on if you're not, if you're not enjoying it, this thing is turned off. Yeah, exactly.
So, suggestions were, quote unquote, getting off sugar. That's the.
Well, so we talked about the 4 different types that Teitelbaum, the 4 different types of sugar addicts, that he talked about. Is it because you're energy depleted? Is it because your microbiome is out of balance? Is it because your stress is out of balance? Or is it because your hormones are out of balance? So we talked about these different types and how addressing that, whether it's through this book or whether you, asked him for help, or that. Figure out what's the obstacle to you getting off of that food and eliminate that obstacle, eliminate that wall that you're beating your head against, trying to do it through willpower, that ends up with a shame and blame cycle. Well, no, it never was meant to, it never was gonna. So that's what he talks about is those 4 different types of sugar addicts. I didn't.
What if you just like it?
Sure.
Sugar. Sweet.
We all do. There isn't a person in this room that wouldn't say that they love sugar, absolutely. So what's the obstacles? For me, it's what to add in, whether it's more flavors, or whether it's what to take away, which is whatever your obstacle is. So that's what I would seek out if I were you. What's your obstacle? What's keeping you from propelling yourself forward?
How would you find that out?
Well, like I said, there's a resource that I pointed to if you need help, and he talks about specific supplements and specific things, with that, or you seek out help.
Like take those cravings.
Absolutely, yeah. Because if it's an excess of stress, that's your obstacle. Then finding ways to regulate what is going on. Everybody's different.
Yeah, because when you stop and think about that, like a Saturday night we're sitting watching TV and a bowl of ice cream. I'm not stressed. I just want some ice cream. You know what I'm saying?
Full on pleasure, right?
Ice cream is it's wonderful. I mean, sitting in front of the fireplace with a blanket and you eat your ice cream and making spoon.
Sure.
It's the best dope on the planet.
There you go. Absolutely.
It's really good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
What about allergic food allergies versus
Sure.
sensitivities and allergic to the protein in the foods and inflammation?
Well, ultimately, 70% of our immune system is present in our digestive system. So to me, a food allergy happens here, as well. You know, we test it on our skin, which to me is ridiculous. We don't eat food by spreading it all over our skin, so why on earth are we testing food, you know, allergies that way? You know, to me, our immune system is really out of balance if our skin is impacted as well. You know, those antibodies that, you know, have to do with an allergic reaction, to me, sensitivities also have an allergic reaction, but it's an IgA. You know, it's the part of our immune system that lives within our digestive system, or it's the part of our immune system that floats around looking for trouble. You know, where's trouble, where's trouble, where's trouble? Because before this has been trouble. So yeah, definitely. You know, food allergies, you know, are you asking if they can be helped or what?
What do you do with them? Like, I mean,
Well, healing the immune system, yeah, definitely.
so trying to heal the immune system.
Yeah, asking that question of why. Why is your immune system decided that peanuts or, you know, whatever food that it is danger? Why is that? Yeah, exactly.
Because it has like yeast and
Could certainly have to do.
so all these things and mushrooms and dairy and wheat and chocolate and like I mean everything. So then what do you do?
Work with the immune system. You got to balance the immune system. Your immune system is like it's backed in a corner. You know, it's like that's how your immune system is acting. It's fighting everything and everybody, you know, when it's doing that. So you've got to, so the immune system is where you have to work and get the immune system to calm down.
By food or what?
Well, through food, through healthy thoughts, through healthy emotions, through determining what is safe, because that's what our immune system does, is determines what is safe. Sometimes our immune system is just listening to us, and if we feel unsafe, then our immune system feels unsafe.
So can the actual food allergy go away if you know?
I've seen it happen, absolutely. Whether it's through dealing with the immune system itself, you know, treatments like NAET, I've seen food allergies go away. I learned this allergy elimination technique is what it's called. It's a person's name, Namumaprad, allergy elimination technique, which is based on, you know, what you or I would think of, you know, what I thought of for sure as hocus pocus. You hold, you know, you have this person hold the food in a little vial and you rub different, acupuncture points on their body and you know, stimulate their spine. I saw a kid, because I worked right across from a hospital, was where the clinic that I worked in. Parents had a picnic right out front and had peanut butter sandwiches because they didn't want to live in fear anymore of, you know, having somebody open a peanut butter cup and having their daughter, you know, go through a potential allergic reaction based on it. So I've seen it happen where the immune system can be balanced.
So I have just one more question. You know, when I sit and I think about, you know, today, you know, and a lot of us are mothers, grandmothers, and so on.
Sure.
Well, you know, back when I was growing up, I don't think we were all in, my parents were all into this healthy thing or anything. We just, you know, they just provided. But we grew a lot of our food.
Exactly.
You know, we didn't get food out of cans or bags or anything, you know, then.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had never heard of until, you know, here within the last few years, a decade or so, about things like, you know, kids have allergies to peanuts and eggs and just anything. And, I mean, this wasn't happening back when I was a kid growing up. I had never heard of some of the things.
Sure.
The kids are having tubes in their ears because they have, I mean, wow. I mean.
Yeah. How much sicker, you know, I mean, that's, you know, the hypotheses, you know, that are out there and the theories that are out there is that as our planet gets sicker, we're getting sicker, you know, from that standpoint as well. As we feel less safe, you know, as our, you know, on a day-to-day basis, we hear about the terrible things that are happening, you know, in our own backyards, you know, and further. You know, as we feel less safe, our immune systems feel less safe. From that standpoint, our immune systems listen to what we take in, you know. It's not just as important what we take in here, but what we take in here and what we take in here. You know, that's what I talk about with my teenager. You know, we are consumers on lots of different levels, and we're talking about diet tonight, but it's just as important how we think, you know, and what we take into our bodies. You know, I certainly, you know, have done a news fast before, and it makes a huge difference in the way that I feel and the safety that I feel in the world, not because I'm not looking at it, but because I'm not constantly looking at it, you know.
And phone and iPad.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yes.
We have a granddaughter that's only like 5 weeks old. And they've
Congratulations.
And they've been battling. We had 2 kids that were colicky.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know for sure if that's what it is.
Sure.
Or they talked about, you know, maybe being tongue-tied, or, I mean, they've been to the doctor
Sure.
quite a lot. And she was breast
Yeah.
pumping,
Uh-huh.
breast milk. And so finally, in desperation, they went out Sunday to Target, picked up some formula and trying it.
Sure.
But I don't know that it's necessarily even having a great effect, but it's their.
Well, there's great lactation support, you know, and if she's still, you know, in that questioning period, that would be really, really important. Working at it from a structural standpoint, you know, there's chiropractors that work with kids, and and if you're unfamiliar with something called craniosacral therapy, it is a completely gentle, you know, method of rebalance that to me is about the welcome to the world that most babies don't get, the gentle welcome to the world, you know, about bringing the body back to balance from the stress of birth. It's hard business being born. It's tough, you know, physically, mentally, and emotionally, to go from completely surrounded by love and safety to this, you know, what we deal with every day. You know, in that first introduction, that first 5 weeks is rough. So having, you know, many of us, you know, are educated enough to know about doulas that are there during the birth, right? You know, that's for the mom. A craniosacral therapist is somebody who's a, you know, doula and an introduction, you know, for a baby, and there's several around that are amazing. So I would suggest something like that to see if maybe there's a structural component, and if not, if it's a tongue tie or if it's something going on with lactation, or that mom lets down too fast, or, you know, it's got to be a balance between mom and baby, you know, and sometimes that's what's going on, is that what the food mom is making is not working so well for the baby either. My son, you know, who I've talked about his situation, had 9 different food sensitivities, you know, and thankfully I had that information and I had the ability to work with that. Otherwise, I would have been, you know, and I still ended up in desperation and Target trying to find a formula and he couldn't tolerate any of the formulas because of all of those things. So thankfully, you know, there is great support, you know, and if they're not around here, then the same support exists wherever they are to find something like that. Yeah.
Would be a great therapy also for a youngster, 6 months old as well, for bowel situation that.
Well, microbiome, you know, always supporting a healthy microbiome from that standpoint. And at 6 months, we're starting to think about introducing food, you know, is typically the idea. So slower the better, you know, is always my standpoint. And, you know, I was brave enough at one point to ask my mom, you know, what I was fed, because I knew already what my food sensitivities were, and I had theories, you know, about what I had been fed and what foods had been introduced early for me, because I knew that from my standpoint, I don't tolerate rice really well. It's not one of those foods that does well with me. So I asked, well, you know, when did you introduce rice cereal for me? And my mom said, we waited with you. It was 2 weeks before we started feeding you. Your brothers got it earlier than you did because we wanted you to sleep through the night. The cereals were introduced when I was, you know, so it was immediately like, whew, okay. And that makes sense why, you know, my system has always been like, rice is just something to sit in your stomach. It's not actually something to fill you up or give you nutrition. It's just there to put you to sleep. So that's always been the relationship I've had with rice from the get-go, from 2 weeks old. So, you know, the slower the better. And we don't make enzymes to digest grains until we're 12 months old. So to me, not introducing any grains until after that, which is probably why we have to say I'm sorry with something like the paleo diet for so many people, is because we started out not being able to digest it well, you know, but introduced it for other reasons. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on how many times a day to eat, or how long your eating should be?
Listen to your compass, you know, so that's one of the biggest things that I see people is, you know, listening to this rather than listening to this, you know. So some people do better with smaller portions more often, and some people do better with giving themselves space. And I can make an argument for either way. You probably know, you've probably read both arguments, you know, letting your digestive system rest versus keeping your blood sugar steady, you know. So do you need to heal your gut? You know, if so, give yourself some space, give yourself some time, maybe eat more fiber so that it digests slower. You know, does your digestive system need to heal? Or is blood sugar your issue? Are you constantly running on empty or relying on sugar and you're craving sugar because your blood sugar is out of balance? You know, then eat for blood sugar balance, which is every few hours. So listen to your compass.
Any other questions? Sandy, thank you so much for being here.